There's a certain kind of silence you carry, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that sits in your chest when someone gets too close. It happens in small moments, a message you don't reply to, a feeling you can't quite express, a connection you quietly start to pull away from, even when you don't want to. You tell yourself you just need space, that you're independent, that you're better off alone, but deep down, there's something else, because the truth is, you don't avoid attachment because you don't feel. You avoid it because you feel too much. And somewhere along the way, your mind learned a dangerous equation. Closeness equals risk. Vulnerability equals pain. Attachment equals loss. So you adapted. You became self-contained, emotionally efficient, distant but composed. And here's the paradox. The very mechanism that once protected your heart is now the reason it feels so alone. You built walls to survive something real, but now those same walls are keeping out the very thing you quietly crave: connection. To understand this pattern, we need to move beyond labels like distant or cold, because what you're experiencing isn't a personality flaw, it's a psychological adaptation. More specifically, it aligns with what psychology calls avoidant attachment. This pattern often forms in early environments where emotional needs were not consistently met, not always through obvious trauma, but through something more subtle, something quieter, emotional neglect. When a child reaches out, not just physically, but emotionally, and is met with dismissal, inconsistency, or absence, they learn something fundamental: my needs are too much. Closeness is unreliable. Depending on others is unsafe. So instead of expressing, they suppress. Instead of reaching, they retreat. Over time, this becomes embedded in the nervous system. The body itself begins to interpret intimacy as a threat. This is where hypervigilance comes in, a constant low-level scanning of emotional environments, not for connection, but for potential harm. Even in safe relationships, your system stays alert, ready to withdraw, ready to protect. Then there's the emotional neglect schema, a deeply rooted belief that no one will truly meet your emotional needs. So why risk asking? Why risk needing? And neurologically, this pattern becomes reinforced through the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for self-referential thinking. It loops narratives like, I'm better off alone. I don't need anyone. People always disappoint, not because they're true, but because they feel familiar. And in psychology, familiar often feels safer than healthy. But this adaptation comes at a cost, a quiet, invisible cost. You don't always feel it in obvious ways. It doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like emotional numbness, detachment, a strange inability to fully arrive in moments that are supposed to feel meaningful. This is what Carl Jung warned about when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Because what you call independence may actually be avoidance. What you call strength may actually be self-protection. And what you call peace may actually be emotional withdrawal. There's a grief here, but it's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's the grief of what you never allowed yourself to have. The conversations you didn't start, the love you didn't fully receive, the version of yourself you never felt safe enough to become. And underneath it all, there's a fear, not just fear of others, but a deeper one, the fear of being seen and still not being chosen. So you choose first, you detach first, you leave before anyone else can. And in doing so, you maintain control, but you also maintain distance. And over time, that distance becomes your identity. This doesn't stay in childhood. It evolves, it adapts, it follows you into adulthood, quietly shaping how you live, love, and relate. You might notice it in ways that don't seem obvious at first. You might avoid deep conversations, even with people you trust. Feel uncomfortable when someone shows too much affection. Pull away right when things start getting serious. Struggle to express your needs clearly. Prefer isolation even when you feel lonely. Downplay emotions, yours and others, in relationships. You may appear calm, independent, low maintenance, but internally, there's a constant push-pull, a desire for closeness, followed by an instinct to retreat. In your career, you might over-rely on self-sufficiency, struggle to ask for help, feel safer in control than in collaboration. In terms of self-worth, you define value through independence, through not needing anyone, because needing feels dangerous. With boundaries, you may either be too rigid or avoid setting them altogether, because both require emotional exposure. In emotional regulation, you don't explode, you disconnect, you shut down, you detach, and in your internal identity, you see yourself as someone who's just like this. But this is where the shift begins, because these are not fixed traits. They are learned survival strategies, and what is learned can be unlearned, but not through force, not through self-criticism, through awareness, through what psychology calls witnessing. Observing your patterns without immediately trying to fix or judge them. Because healing doesn't start with change, it starts with recognition. Healing this pattern is not about suddenly becoming emotionally open. It's about slowly teaching your system that it is safe to feel again. That connection does not equal danger. That vulnerability does not always lead to pain. This begins with inner child reparenting. Learning to give yourself the emotional validation you didn't receive. Saying things like, "It makes sense that I feel this way. My needs are not too much. I'm allowed to be seen." Then there's shadow work, facing the parts of yourself you've suppressed, the neediness, the fear, the longing, not rejecting them, but integrating them, because what you resist controls you, and what you accept transforms. You also need to work with your body, because this isn't just mental, it's physiological. Through nervous system regulation, breathing practices, mindful awareness, grounding techniques, you teach your body that closeness is not a threat. And most importantly, you begin choosing softness over survival, not all at once, but in small, deliberate moments, letting someone stay a little longer, expressing one honest feeling, not running up at the first sign of discomfort, and maybe, for the first time, allowing yourself to be known, because the goal here is not perfection. It's not becoming someone else. As Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, the purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things. And love, connection, vulnerability, these are greater things. They will challenge you, but they will also expand you. So if you see yourself in this, understand this clearly. You were not born distant. You were taught to be, and what was taught can be gently undone. The goal is not to be fixed. The goal is to become whole. And maybe today, wholeness begins with a single decision to stop running and start allowing. If this resonated with something you've never been able to put into words, stay with this work, because this is where real change begins.